All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our, I don't know, probably the fourth one of these I've done, but the first one of this kind of format. So my name is Dan Gordon, owner of Flashfire Industries, and I just wanted to thank you guys all for joining us tonight, especially during these trying times that we're dealing with. So I'm going to start off by just kind of going through the evening. Then I'll introduce the three panelists that we're going to work with, and then we'll kind of get going. And we'll probably go 2.5 hours, depending on how everyone's doing. So it seems like everyone got onto the app okay. Right now, everyone's probably muted, so we don't hear you talking or any background noise. That's really the biggest thing. If you're not talking, keep yourself muted, because any sort of background noise everyone hears, and it resonates through pretty quickly. But if you have a question, there's two things you can do. You can either raise your hand through the app, or there's a chat window. You can open that, start typing, and that'll come directly to me. And then I can either, then call on you to ask your question, or I'll just read it aloud and we'll address it from there. So those are the two ways to go with questions, comments, anything like that. Obviously, these are not normal times. I hope everyone's doing all right. Obviously, career firemen, we are thankful enough that we still have a job that's paying. If you're a volunteer and you've been laid off or anything, stick with it. We're here. If you need to talk, I know anyone on here is happy to help you out. And that's kind of segues into why we're doing all these and keeping them, free and fun, because this should be hopefully a de-stressor that we can kind of enjoy and not be something that's, stressing us out or anything like that. Escape for a couple hours, a couple times a week, and, learn a little bit too. So what we're going to be using tonight, and I am going to, you guys should be able to see my screen now where my mouse is. You should see like 4 quadrants of a house fire. This is a program called Fire Studio 6 that I purchased, and with the intention of rolling out programs like this coming in the fall, basing around size up, first ins, tactics, and things like that. Obviously, with the situation that we're in, I sped that up a little bit so that we could use this to our advantage while we're quarantined inside. But I think you'll see it can do a lot tonight. We have most of the scenarios are all a point in time. So although that they are video-esque, if you will, it does not progress over time. That is something that the app can do, or the program can do. So I look forward to playing around with that a little bit more in the future. I've done a couple, I'm working on with a couple departments for after action reviews, where I'm basically taking the Google images and simulating the conditions that they had on arrival for their after action reviews. So there's a lot of things that you can do with this program that's pretty cool. And we're just scratching the surface kind of what it can do. But all the houses that we're taking tonight, that we're looking at, are ones that we've taken pictures of, either me or guys from, out there in the public. So it's not pre-canned stuff. These are real houses in our area. I know I have ones from Bridgeport, Meriden, and New Canaan represented here tonight, along with other ones. So it's pretty, hopefully it'll be pretty good and you guys enjoy it. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our hosts, and then, or our panelists, and then we'll go through kind of how the night's going to run, and then we'll get right into it. So we'll start with Paul Wilson. Paul, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, or do you want me to do it? And be careful.
No, I'm confident in that part. I think we're good there. So good evening, guys. Thanks for taking the time out and helping Flash Fires, advertise this program, which is going to be great for all of us down the road. My name is Paul Wilson, New Canaan Fire Department, as it was displayed in the flyer. Very difficult demographics within the department, with 24 career guys and 6 guys on duty, which is a lot different than what you'll see with Captain Esposito later on when he introduces himself. I've been in the fire service for about 30 years and work with Dan quite frequently. I think this is going to be a great opportunity for us all to do a little learning.
Cool. Thank you. Next is Dan Costa, who probably out of the three I know the least well, but in the time that I've gotten to know him, he definitely has impressed me with knowledge and enthusiasm in the fire service. So Dan, why don't you give us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks for the kind words, Dan, and thanks everybody for joining us. Uh, I'm a lieutenant in Meriden. I've worked there for just about 10 years now. I'm still actively volunteer in Wolcott, where I started off as an explorer 16, 17 years ago. So a little bit of career and volunteer experience. Meriden has 21 guys on a shift, 5 engines, one of which is a quint with 4 guys, and a truck company with 4 guys.
All right, and last but not least, probably a face and name that you guys have heard. He also lives behind an Instagram handle, and I will say probably one of the more underrated instructors in the area. Yes, I've learned a lot from reading his posts. I think he has a lot to offer. So Nick, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Kind words, Dan. I appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. My name is Nick Esposito. I currently work for the City of Bridgeport Fire Department. I've been there for 21 years. Right now I'm a captain and I serve on the rescue company. I worked on the engines and the trucks through my time, both as a firefighter and a fire officer. Before that, I worked for a small fire department in Westchester County over in New York. And I grew up in a very small town in Westchester. And I volunteered there from when I was a little kid. So I've kind of seen a little bit of a lot of the different stuff coming up through. So excited to see where this goes tonight.
Cool. Thank you. So as with the last few, I've said that we were sticking to size ups and first ins. And tonight we're delving right into tactics. And we got into a lot of tactics the other night, but we're really that's it tonight. Size ups are something obviously everyone should see and everyone should be on the same page with. Tactics, I mean, that's where the fork hits the road, and it's such a varied topic. It might be the only thing that creates more internet enemies than politics, but we're gonna, I'm not worried about tonight. What I will say is that I think the reason why it creates so many enemies on the internet is that resources are not discussed, and it's always, well, how would you attack this, and no one ever asks the question, well, how many guys are you rolling up with? And I think that's what we're going to see tonight is if you're in New Canaan rolling up with 6 guys, you're probably going to attack it a little bit different than if you're Bridgeport rolling up with a full assignment. So maybe I'm wrong, but that's where we're going to get into. What I will say is for a while I was always thinking water had everything to do with it. And water is obviously one of the most important things on the fire ground. What I will say is I've started to read the new UL study that's out there. It's 750 pages, so I'm at about page 4. But the one thing I found really interesting with it, and I'm by no means an expert on it, is that out of all the scenarios that they did, it's pretty similar a building to like this, where they did like a 1-story ranch type style. And even in the most extreme conditions where they had like 2 bedrooms going into the hallway, the most amount of fire that they used was 300 gallons to put both bedrooms out. And so, I don't think there's a department anywhere that rolls up with less than 2,000 gallons on the road. I'm thinking like a city that has 4 engines of 500 gallons each. And so I think that's kind of changing my perspective a little bit on it. And, we can certainly discuss that tonight, but I just wanted to throw that out there as a number that I kind of thought was pretty interesting. In terms of the structures that we're going to do, we're going to start out with this one that you guys see, a basic, I think fairly straightforward one, so we can kind of discuss that. Then we're going to do one balloon frame one, and then we're going to get into multiples of different variations. So we'll get into walkout basements, or basement fires with and without walkout basements, I should say. We'll get into attached garages, which is a big one. And then we'll get into some commercial occupancies as well. We're going to stick to 1-story commercial occupancies, and we're going to kind of have a little bit of the older strip mall style. I'm sorry, the newer strip mall styles and the older, more taxpayer-like one-story commercials. We can't cover everything. We are not going to try to cover everything, but I think we'll get a fairly good head start. So without further ado, I'm sure we'll learn a lot on the first one, but why don't we start with our 6-man per shift on this one? So, Paul, first of all, I have a couple questions. Who's taking command at a New Canaan incident? You're muted right now, so you got to unmute yourself.
There we go. The phone was ringing before. I was trying to do the right thing. So yeah, we have 6 guys on duty. We have a captain who typically rides out first on the engine, and then we have a lieutenant who, again, depending on where the assignment is, we're going to cross staff our second due rig. So anything in a commercial area, we're running a truck, and anything in a residential area, we're running the tanker. So we're pulling up with 3,750 gallons of water and 6 guys. So typically what the lieutenant's doing is when we're pulling up to an assignment, the engine's is stopping at the mouth of the driveway, laying down the driveway. So as you can imagine, we've got a lot of pretty large driveways, in the town of New Canaan. And when the tanker gets there, he's kicking 5-inch. So if we need any additional apparatus down that driveway, they can get down the driveway. So the lieutenant's going to be delayed getting to the house. So the captain is taking command 9 times out of 10. We do have a career chief where he's there normal business hours. He's there 8 to 3:30, and he'll take command. If it's a confirmed fire or sounds like it could be an interesting job during the day. On weekends, it's the captain, and on overnights, it's going to be the captain.
Cool. All right. So take this house. Whether if it's this far off the road, are you bringing the rig into the driveway, or are you stretching from the?
Yeah, it's hit or miss with shifts. It seems like most guys like to bring the engine into the garage, just about. We pull down almost every driveway.
Okay.
So again, we're pulling up to that. Keep in mind that the town of New Canaan is only protected by hydrants. 1/3 of the town is protected by hydrants. So we're bringing a lot of our water into our assignments. So we're pulling up to this Raised Ranch assignment right here. Engine's going to drop the 5-inch, right at the mouth of the driveway. Going to pull off as if one of those fence posts right there are going to be the plug. We're wrapping it, and we're going down the driveway. Like all career departments, everybody's got their assignment. You got your nozzleman, you got your actually, I should say we're a little bit different because the firefighter behind the officer, he's going to be our forcible entry guy. We don't have a guy in a truck coming in doing our work for us. So you got a guy with the irons, who's going to be our forcible entry. You got the nozzleman. The officer is going to be kind of like a working command. He's going to be doing his 360. He's going to be outside. And, for the first few minutes of any assignment, it could very well be just the nozzleman, inside stretching the line. So it's a little bit different.
So that accounted for 3 or 4 guys. You got the chauffeur, you got the nozzleman, you got the officer, and you got the irons man. So what are the other 2 guys in the other rig doing?
Yeah, you have the operator of the tanker. So he's glued to the pump panel. He's making sure that the engine's going to be getting water if we run through that 750. And realistically, with 6 guys and not knowing, who's coming in next, whether it's we have a volunteer engine coming in from New Canaan, or we'll have a mutual aid company, whether it's Norwalk or Pound Ridge, Vista, or one of the volunteer companies from Darien. So we don't know who's coming in, and again, time of day plays a significant role for all of us. So we're going to work initially with 4 guys. Again, like I said, that lieutenant's going to be delayed as he's kicking 5-inch on the side of the driveway, and depending on how long that driveway is, it could be a significant amount of time. So if we take this particular scenario, it's not going to take long. Obviously, we're not getting another rig down that driveway either way. So we got that lieutenant kicking the 5-inch or assisting the 5-inch down, and he's going to be our 3rd man in, with this particular fire.
And what do you? Obviously everything's going to dictate, but you pull up to this in the daytime. No one's meeting you. you don't see any cars, no evidence that anyone's home or whatever, are you probably hitting this from the outside, or are you stretching to the front door and going down the hallway?
That's the thing. We're we're going right away. We're going to be as aggressive as possible. Looking at this fire, obviously you've got your Alpha Bravo corners going good. Looking at the front door, maybe there's an interior door that's closed. We don't have good smoke pushing from the front door. Doesn't look like there's all that much coming from the eaves on the Alpha side there. So we may be able to buy ourselves a few minutes pushing them through the front door, getting down that hallway, and knowing the configuration of your standard raised ranch, we should be able to get to the seat of the fire very quickly.
Yeah.
So, so we're going to go in, with the nozzle man and hopefully lieutenant, and once the control man gets the door all set, he's going to be humping the line for us down there. We're going to try and go get it right now.
Are you going to charge the line at the front door, or are you going to peek into that front door, and if it's completely clear, stretch dry to the bedroom door and charge it inside there?
That's one of our SOPs. We go in with a charge line for just about everything. We do have a lot of houses, getting outside the spectrum of this particular house that, there's 3-story residentials, we're talking 10,000, 15,000 square foot homes where, most of these houses should be treated as commercial buildings. We just don't have the manpower, to be stretching to 2.5 and into these houses either. So,
Cool.
So yeah, we're going in charged, I'd say 99.9% of the time.
That's interesting. Good. All right, cool. And then searches, are those kind of, unless you have a reported trap, are those just kind of getting done later after you get the main body of fire knocked down?
Yeah, as we're going, we're multitasking, and, can talk to Captain Esposito and, talk with the, a lot of guys, and it's a lot different than even, with you in the city. You're throwing a lot of manpower. Everybody's got their assignment. You're going in with, like you said, first in engine with 4 guys. You're multitasking, and you're going to go in and, as you're conducting your job, you can do a good little sweep of the hallway in the room that you're entering and see what you can accomplish right there without impeding in, fire suppression.
Nick or Dan, do you want to jump in? Anything? I mean, I think that's probably how both of you guys would operate. What do you think?
You want to go ahead, Dan, or I can take it.
Oh yeah, go ahead. And I'll go after you.
So in an occupancy like this, it would be typically on the north end of Bridgeport. Bridgeport, honestly, the vast majority of the resources are on the southern third. So if this was going on like the border of Trumbull, then you really could have a 4-man engine there for a few minutes by themselves. So it really wouldn't deviate too much different from what Paul just said. Kind of a news flash, most of the stuff that we have in Bridgeport is right on the street. We're not very well educated as far as committing down the driveway. So we should, in this situation, I think we would. We don't have a policy on it to say that you do or you don't go in a driveway. I personally would like to see the engine commit to the driveway on this one. And then even if they just dropped their line at the beginning of the driveway and went in, or if they did take a hydrant. On our north end, our hydrants are more spread out. We are fully hydranted though. And so, yeah, the big thing here is giving that first size up. And then pretty much like what Paul said, we're going to go in that front door with a charge line. And really it could be that nozzle person alone for a little while because the officer is going to be doing some of the outside things. The hydrant person will either be at the hydrant or they'll be chasing some kinks and being a backup. So, not that much different. The priority here would.
Nick, is your first engine grabbing a hydrant on the way in, or is it waiting for the second dude to grab it?
A lot of times they'll talk on the radio and they'll say, hey, we're going to go in straight, and tell the other one which one that they could take. That's kind of how it is most of the time. And usually, typically it's because the hydrants are more spread out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Dan?
Yeah, so I think to kind of echo a couple of things that Nick just said, we in Meriden typically too, we're not really looking at driving down or up a driveway. But I would agree. And at this house, I would want, if we were pulling up first due to this, I would want the engine going into the driveway, just so we're not losing that 150 feet of hose out in the front yard. A house like this, your first engine is either gonna have four or three guys in Meriden. The four-man company is huge, and I'm lucky enough to work there. So, I can do a quick 360 or at least get a peek around the back of the building while the nozzleman stretches the line. Our first due is not doing anything with water supply unless the hydrant is immediately right there. The SOP is that the second due engine makes the hydrant, lays the supply line. So if you do have a hydrant, within 75 feet or so of the apparatus, typically the first due driver will say that over the radio. And if they're squared away, they'll start establishing their own water supply. And then, just we'll get in with the four-man company, the two of us, the officer and the hydrant man would force the front door if it needed. If there is no hydrant man, if you're on the three-man company, a lot of times the officer ends up doing the forceful entry by himself or with some assistance of the nozzle man. We run Minuteman pre-connect, so the nozzle man can really flake out the majority of his hose line by himself. And then if we're gonna, this is pretty straightforward. Going up, you're gonna go up that half flight of stairs in a raised ranch and go to the left here, and you should be able to find the fire pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So as the officer, I'd probably be behind a nozzleman, maybe trying to search or do a quick search of the bedrooms as we go down the hallway, and just to get a nice hit in the fire. It's a single family house, so charging the line outside is going to be what we would normally do, and yeah.
So everyone, yeah, I mean, I think you guys are all on the same page. What I took out of that is regardless of what you're showing up with, everything from your own water to a hydrant across the street, you guys are stretching the same line to the same place. If you pull up to this and you've got a woman screaming that her kid is in there, is that changing what your first tactics are? I'll start with Dan just because you just went. If the mother comes up to you and says, my kid's in not the fire room, but this bedroom, does that change what your initial tactics are?
No, we'd still be going in with a line. The only thing that would change is, for me personally, having a four-man crew, I'd be looking to do a search by myself and communicating that with the nozzleman and the backup man. And telling them, hey, I'm gonna search, I'm gonna go to that bedroom where the mother's saying the kid is. And, in a house like this too, the first due engine is gonna be there for a couple minutes before anybody else, including the shift commander.
Mm-hmm.
So relaying that to the shift commander and the truck company, so they have an idea, of what they're gonna be encountering when they get here.
Yeah,
especially for us, typically, if there's a confirmed entrapment, even in a single-family house like this, most of the shift commanders are going to add the fourth engine.
Mm-hmm.
We get 3 engines in the truck on a report of a fire. So I think if the first due engine radioed to the shift commander, and said we have a confirmed entrapment here, that they're all going to add that fourth engine just to have, so they can dedicate probably 2 companies to do a search. Yep. And have that fourth engine end up being the RIT team.
Yeah, I'm looking what that first rig. Yeah, so you're not changing, but as the officer, you'll probably peel off and do a little bit more of a search, is what you're saying. That's cool. Absolutely. Paul, what about you? Are you guys adjusting when you get on scene if that person comes out to you and says, "There's my kid's trapped"?
Yeah, we're still dragging the line in, going right in. We may go ahead and have that captain just follow us right in, and he'll go in and make that confirmed grab in the room. Which would deviate slightly from the norm, but I think that would be probably the only difference.
Okay. Nick, what about you guys?
It's the same, and I mean, the good thing about that is that the consistency there is that everybody's realizing that you need that line, not necessarily to put the fire out, but at least to kind of keep conditions in check, because life safety is a priority. So you're going to try to get that line in there quick to protect the 1 or the 2 people that are going to be doing that search, and hopefully, make a difference there.
Yeah, cool. And I'll just mention again, because I just read it, that UL study, it's amazing that if this door to the fire room is closed, the adjoining bedrooms that did not have fire never got to toxic levels where someone would have died. So that really, I mean, I know we're pushing it in the fire service, but it's amazing. Closing that door makes all the difference. And same when we get into VES, closing that door after you get in there is going to make your life a lot easier. So anyone have any questions? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Not to jump way ahead or anything, but the reality is that there's a ton of searchable space in that place, regardless of how much smoke it's pushing. And that's the thing we need to realize is that, outside conditions don't necessarily dictate or represent what's really going on the inside. So, it is important.
Yeah, and it talked about someone that was close to the fire but on the floor had a better chance of surviving than someone remote from the fire but on a bed, 2 feet, 3 feet in the air. So it was, from what I've read, it was very interesting so far. So before I go to the next one, does anyone else have any questions or comments or anything on this? I think we hit it pretty good. We started off with, not that any fire's a bunt, but I think we started off with a fairly straightforward one where there's not much deviation. So, all right, so we'll go to the next one. So this is the next one. This is in Monroe. This is, we'll start with Nick. I'll just kind of let you roll with it. You can give me a version if you want. You don't have to. It's right on the street. Go ahead.
Yeah, so if I'm on an engine, our policy says if you see smoke or not. Obviously, you're going to take a lot of things that it says from the computer as well. But ideally, you'd like to see that they're going to take a hydrant. So the size of it is a 2-story single-family dwelling, smoke showing. On my size up, I don't know if I'm necessarily going to say that I see it pushing heavier on that delta side. Just because it's kind of fluid. Nothing's really screaming at me yet as far as exactly what I have. But to me, it's telling me that if it's not on the first floor, it's definitely below grade.
Yeah. So I guess my question for you, and this will pass along to others, where you have a situation like this, and we'll stick with no entrapment for, same, we don't know, no one greeting us. Are you committing a line into the structure, or are you going to send a crew in without a line to try and find the fire first and then direct where the fire is going?
I'm just moving my thing around here. So, I mean, ideally as the officer, I'm going to tell my, cause we're going to park right in front or relatively close anyway. And I'm going to tell my nozzle person to wait. And I'm going to go and get a real quick look because I will see that smoke pushing on that delta side. And then I'm going to say, yeah, we're going to stretch to that D side, that delta side. And we're going to assume that we're going to be pushing into the basement.
Yeah. Okay. Paul, what do you got here? I mean, obviously it's a house on the street, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, fairly similar to what Nick was saying. Based on the way the smoke's pushing, it's not necessarily screaming basement, but it's it very well could there. I can't tell where that door is going to, a mud room or a basement itself. Again, we're waiting on the captain to make the determination as to where we're going to be pushing in. I would assume we're going in on that delta side based on the velocity we have, and to see what we can go and do right there. But not really all that concerned yet with if we're going to look further into this, as far as the propane tanks and all that stuff. And nobody ever calls my house, and it's been 3 times already today.
It's the IRS.
So I'm not really. What's that?
It's the IRS. They're trying to give you your stimulus check.
Yeah, I heard Trump signed it. Is that true?
Yeah, I heard that too.
Yes, I'm more concerned about getting to the seat of the fire right there as opposed to, any exposures with the propane tanks or anything such.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the propane tanks because there was a couple scenarios where it was the same thing. It was like a fire heavy on the 2nd floor and people in their first in were saying, I have 2 propane tanks. And to me, unless the propane tanks are involved in fire or the fire's impinging on the propane tanks, that's not something I'm saying in my first in. It's something I'll address later. By all means, if the fire is blowing out the window into the propane tanks, that's something you got to address. But, first ins, things that happen by that first company are things that, need to be addressed immediately in my mind. Do you guys think this is balloon frame? I don't know. Some things make me think it is. Some make me think it's not. What do you think? Nick, you probably see more balloon frame than anybody. Dan, you probably do too. I see it here and there, but not as much as you guys.
The only reason I say that it is, or it would be, is because I would kind of try to figure out what the rest of the neighborhood looks like.
That doesn't help here, but yeah.
Yeah, it really doesn't. It really doesn't. Some of the windows are stacked and some of them are not.
That's what I was thinking.
I'll say it is because I got to say something.
Yeah. Well, if you're not sure, then you got to treat it as balloon frame in that we got to get, walls opened up, a crew to the attic and to see what's going on. And that's kind of where I wanted to segue with this one. This obviously is not a bunt. This is one of those where you might be you might have this out in 15 minutes and home in an hour, or you might be here in 4 hours still chasing it through the walls. And so how do you guys, Bridgeport, you guys do balloon frame all the time. New Canaan, you certainly have balloon frames. You may not be doing them all the time. Meriden, certainly you have balloon frames. So how are you addressing the manpower concerns of the labor intensiveness of a balloon frame, and what are your priorities? And I'll say that in that, especially in a New Canaan where you're going to need a line on every floor. Certainly in Shelton, you've run into balloon frames plenty. You're going to need a line on every floor. It's going to be a very smoky fire. May not be super hot, may be super hot, but you're going to go through cylinders. You're going to go through manpower. So how are you addressing that, and take it from there?
Well, right away when we pull up, or if we have any confirmation as we're responding to the assignment, that it's a working fire, all of our fires get banged up immediately to a second alarm. So we already had a mutual aid coming in, whether it's going to be for water or for just additional manpower will be determined as we're en route, knowing the districts and the water supply. So again, it's going to be delayed with getting the manpower there, but trying to find the seat of the fire and get to where we can try and make a difference immediately is going to be big. Other than that, just getting that lieutenant, and if possible, if we can eliminate the tanker operator, right away, to at least maybe bump up and try and get a second set of eyes on what's going on from the exterior, so the captain can come in and start hooking and looking a little bit, would be a big asset as well.
So if this is a basement fire,
the size of the house. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
So are you able to stretch two lines? Like if you have extension into the walls, are you able to put a second line into the attic, or not really until mutual aid gets there?
Yeah, no. The lieutenant would pull a second line if needed. Again, this house, that would happen. Based on the size, it's a smaller home. We can certainly navigate that and spread the manpower out a little bit. So the lieutenant would probably be on the second backup line, going to the floor above and looking at that. I mean, you do have a window up in the attic, it looks like. So I mean, maybe go get some eyes up in there right away and see what's happening there too. So, but realistically, we're waiting on manpower to show up.
And Dan, what are you guys? Where's your second line probably going? Do you think it's going to the first floor to try to cut it off, or going straight to the attic, or not sure?
I think it would depend on what we found as far as conditions. And you're going to have, for us at least, a balloon frame building. Typically, you're going to end up with a second alarm, which gets you the entire shift. So all 5 engines in the truck. And I think with this, the second line is going to be kind of dictated by what the first line encounters or what that first officer finds. If we're having trouble finding the fire, that second line may stage momentarily to until they kind of know a better place to go.
Okay.
But if we knew this was a balloon frame and we knew we had fire in the basement, there's a good chance that second line is going to go right up to the attic,
Okay.
unless they find fire somewhere else, immediately that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. And are you sending a crew right to the roof? So your truck crew, are they splitting up? Are they staying all 4 together, going to the roof, inside?
Yeah, so the truck crew, 99% of the time, I would say, they split the officer and the side man. They're going to go inside and do a search, and then the driver and the OV or tiller man, depending on which apparatus is in service, they're going to do the outside ventilation. So at this house, they probably would go right up to the roof and at least be ready to cut. Depending on the shift commander, they may tell them to hold off until they know if there's actually fire in the attic or any kind of high heat in the attic. But the aerial, at the very least, the area will be up, and you'd have two guys up on the roof, ready to go.
Okay. If Nick, what do you think? Anything different or?
No, I mean, an interesting observation here is on that Delta side, the window at the half landing tells me that's where the stairs are, potentially anyway. And so you do run the risk of some congestion there on that Delta side if everybody decides that's the hot spot to go. And then I'm also real curious because of that slider type window on the attic, what's going on up there? Is it just a set of pull down stairs, or is there a finished set of stairs somewhere that may not be where I would anticipate it? But yeah, so hopefully what would happen is the first line would go to the basement. The second line would be that backup and try to hold the stairs. And then that third line, I would like to see kind of go through the front door, but it also depends upon where we locate those stairs. As far as ventilation, we would have, our truck company would split, and then 2 would go to the roof, and then 2 would go interior. And then the second truck, pretty much the same thing. If the second truck doesn't help on the roof, they're either going to all go inside, or 2 will be horizontal on the outside. And then pretty typical, the other 2 are on the inside.
Cool. If anyone, so we believe it's either a basement or it could possibly be maybe a kitchen, on the first floor here. If we're greeted with a report, a credible report of people trapped, say on the second floor in bedrooms, what does that change if you're showing up with 4 guys on your first due? We'll just start with Nick, since we were just talking. Are you,
for me, if we don't take a hydrant and my hydrant person is there, more than likely, if it's going to be a tough stretch or if it's going to be a good job, I'm going to leave the hydrant man with the nozzle person, and I'm going upstairs and doing the search on my own. I would not want to leave my nozzle person alone.
Okay. Paul?
I think at that point, similar to the first scenario, I think the captain's going to be a little bit more aggressive in the inside assistance, and he may very well, to mimic Nick, he may be going up to the floor above and conducting a primary, as well as we're trying to keep the fire in check and even locating the seat of the fire at that point.
Okay. Dan?
Yeah, I think I would echo what Nick said. If we had that 4-man engine company, I would peel off and do a search on my own, at least quickly. But if we're in that, we're 4 of the 5 engines only have 3 guys on them, it's a little bit tougher for the officer to break off and do a search outside of the immediate area of where you're stretching your hose line, because you really, in that situation, you really end up moving the line. It's kind of tough. You may end up even moving the line around more than you really need to, because you can't get ahead and really, kind of scope out where things are going, where you may want to move the line to. But yeah, if a 3-man engine would be tough outside of searching directly along the path of where we're bringing that line.
Yeah. And my problem with this is you don't actually see the fire. We're guessing where the fire is. It could be in the basement. It could be into the right. And so even stretching that first line and getting it into operation, we may not be knocking down the main body of fire like we were at that raised ranch. Obviously at work different than here, but if I was in, this is Monroe. If I was in Monroe with a crew of 3, I would very much consider sending my nozzle man, just to hold this door, maybe hold the stairs, and I'll either take a zoom up the stairs, or, my opinion is this porch is prime for a quick ladder, and now you're able to VES both 2 rooms from this porch nice and easily. and not have to worry about finding your way back to the stairs or finding, getting cut off from fire or anything. It's just kind of something that stuck out to me anytime I see a porch roof. I always think that that's kind of an easy way to use one ladder to access two rooms easily. So I don't know if you guys have any thought on that, but just something I thought of with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very valid. The whole thing is, to go along with the UL stuff you've been talking about, VES has been vilified to some degree, and some places may not be keen on it, and also down to the individual, they may not be keen on it, and that's a tough thing. What we would want to do is exactly what you said. Certainly, I would anticipate anybody in my department would be willing to go up there and go in, shut the door, search back. But some places don't want to do that.
Paul, there's a question about when it's after hours and you guys don't have a chief there. Is the captain going to be staying outside the whole time, or will he kind of get things started and then enter?
He's going to be staying outside a large majority of the time. The chief will respond, off hours. There is a volunteer assistant chief, again, keeping in mind with the times, what's going on now and whatnot. They're not available. They're tied up doing what they're doing. So it's going to be hard to get the manpower there from in town. But for this particular fire after hours, without knowing if there's somebody inside, it's going to be shift by shift. I could tell you, I think my boss would be going in, conducting a primary on the fire above. I would imagine that, we'd try and clear the house as fast as possible and then worry about taking care of, the second in assignments, thereafter. So, life safety, incident stabilization is priority. So you got to get that done first.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions on this one? I mean, what I take away is balloon frame, no matter where you are, it's going to be a lot of manpower. It's going to be a lot of energy and everything. There's no way about it. It doesn't matter what you're showing up with. There's no shortcuts in a balloon frame. You're just going to have to get everything opened up, and that's it. You got anyone else? All right, so we'll go to this one now. So a couple different versions. I have two different versions of the same house. So this is actually on my street, and I don't know everything about it, so it's not like I have inside information about this. But this is what you got. So again, I don't know if this is a workshop area or I don't believe it is an extension of the house, like a great room or whatever. But regardless, I guess we don't know when we pull up anyway. So, how do you? What are you guys thinking with this one? What do you see? What's your thought process? And we'll see how we attack it differently. So, Paul, you're highlighted. So why don't you start us off?
Yeah. Again, not knowing if that's a bonus room or bedrooms, taking a time of day into consideration. Getting water to the seat of the fire is going to be pretty important. Looking into, the rest of the house, got no visible smoke through the alpha side in the main portion of the house there, as opposed to, I'm assuming that's probably an addition there with the 2-car garage, the fire above. We're going to go in, stretch a line inside, try and find the stairs to get to that bonus room and see what we can do.
Okay. What do you guys think the best way is to figure out what is that room?
You got to get a 360. You got to get around that house and see what's going on. See if there's a separate entrance to the back, or if that was a sole next to the garage doors. Is that the entry? To there? Is it a workshop? Is it a place of business?
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is you force this door, and you see what you got. Go in the house and walk right up there. Walk right up to the second floor, and see. I mean, obviously, if you get up to the second floor and it's lights out conditions, then chances are this is all connected. If you get up there and you walk to this wall and it's clear, then it's probably its own entity of that garage. So let's start with it being part of the house, meaning this is a bonus room. You walk out of that room and you're in that main part of the house. Where's your first line going? Dan, I'll start with you. Dan, where's your first line going if that's the configuration of this house?
If that's a configuration, I'm going to go in that front door and, and up the stairs and bring the line right over. That main portion of the house really doesn't look like it's all that big.
Yep.
So, I think it'd be a relatively easy stretch. I'm envisioning the staircase being, somewhere immediately inside the front door.
Yeah.
Probably pretty easy to find. I kind of envision that being part of the main house. It looks like there, originally there was probably another window on that side, going to the corner where the garage abuts the house. I kind of envision that being where they added the house on, or the garage on rather. So yeah, I would, if we knew ahead of time, it was definitely part of the house. I'm going in the front door, and even if we didn't, this would be a situation where I'd go in as the officer and really try and figure out where the fire is. You can make it up that staircase into the second floor of that house in 30 seconds, and at that point, once you get upstairs, you should know if that fire, if you can get to that over the garage there from the second floor of the house.
Yeah.
That way we're not dragging the line around. There's nothing worse than bringing a line somewhere, especially if it's charged, and finding out it's not where it needs to be, and having to back out or reposition.
That will probably ruin your fire. And I just think that when it comes to like the officer taking a peek, when we talk about 2 in, 2 out, and we want to follow the OSHA and be on the safe side, that's referring to an IDLH. And so my feeling is, if I open this door and it's clear as a bell, and I walk up to the second floor and it's clear as a bell, I'm not in an IDLH, and an IDLH would be immediately dangerous to life or health. And so if I'm not in an atmosphere that is an IDLH, I don't believe that there's any hazard to me taking a quick peek and seeing what's going on. Let's say this fire is rolling down the second floor hallway to the top of the stairs. By all means, I'm going to go halfway up the stairs until I hit that smoke layer and be able to get an idea of what the layout is, where it's going, where I want the line. Now, if I open this front door and I get a face full of smoke, I'm not saying that you mask up and go try and take a peek by yourself on air in a, where you can't see your hand in front of your face. But, I think common sense has to, I know common sense is an ugly word, but I think that has to kind of dictate a little bit. So Nick, what do you think?
No, I agree. The interesting thing is that a lot of times you'll hear somebody say, oh, we're going to whack it first, and then we're going to go inside with that line. And it's very hard to do all that. You're really going to be very good at doing one or the other, but it's very hard to do both. So I would just hope that folks aren't thinking about this whole, I'm not saying transitional attack is bad. What I'm saying is that you're remote from where you're going to be making entry, and then you're going to try to switch a charge line. Not that it's a big house, but some distance. So I agree with everything that you've said. Same thing.
So we're all on the same page. If this is the bonus room, the first line's going up there. That's the first engine company. This is my road's a dirt road. So we'll say that we pulled the new cane in, and the rig dropped 5 inch at the end of the road. So I think your second engine's making the water supply, but the hydrant's at the end of the road. So the second engine's making the hydrant supply. What are you having that second crew do? What is your priority at that point? Would you have that second crew stretch a backup line, or would you have that second crew go to the second floor for a search, or would you have them cut a hole in the roof? What's your next priority from getting that first line into operation?
I think conducting that primary is going to be pretty important. So they're going to be going in and doing that. Situation's going to depict what's happening, what our success is with getting to the seat of the fire, if it is, from the adjoining portion of the house or the addition, and speed of getting that line deployed is going to, determine what those next series of guys are going to be doing.
Okay. Dan, what do you think?
For us, I mean, if this is in Meriden, the second engine is making your water supply. And even if this is a house this nice in Meriden is going to be in either the far west or east side. So even at that, and the truck company probably has at longest a 10-minute response from downtown. By the time that second engine gets there, lays 5-inch, makes the hydrant. By SOP, their next responsibility is to pull a second line.
Okay.
And by the time they do all that, the truck company's going to be there, and they're going to have at least 2 guys going in to do a search.
Okay. So a couple of comments to me right now are basically discussing 2 things. Number one, so Nick brought up, which I think is a very valid point. If you're going to hit this, let's say the fire's venting out of this window, but even still, if you're going to hit this here from the outside, and again, this is a smaller house, but if it was a larger house, rather than then dragging the line to the front door and in, why would you not just drop that line there and stretch a second line to make that your interior line? What do you guys think of that as a possibility?
I think it's viable. I think, again, it really comes down to your personnel, what your manning is, and you can easily leave one person on that outside line and do what they're going to do, and then have the other, say in Paul's situation, if there's 2 people left, right? So I would have no problem if I'm a 3-person engine and I know my next engine is a few minutes out. Either A, I hit that with the deck gun, or B, I pull the car fire line because I've already come down the garage and I let them hit it from the outside. And I still have my other 2, the officer and the nozzle person, go and do the traditional attack that we've been talking about.
Yep.
There's a lot of moving parts and none of it's wrong. It's just, how do you work as long as you're really trying to get inside and find those defensible places and do that search.
Yeah. And someone posted, said this, so I will ask it. Someone said, I'm paraphrasing here, but if we charge a line here to go into the front door, and the cardinal rule of interior attack is you don't pass fire, why should we pass it here? Meaning, if we're charging the line out here to enter it, why don't we just hit it for a few seconds and then enter the front door and go up to the second floor?
Well, if they're talking the same line, I do feel that that's not practical.
Okay.
Again, if you want to hit it with the deck gun because you've practiced that, I only say pull the car fire line because it's probably only 100 feet. But if you're going to pull 2 pre-connects that are either 200 or 250 or even stretch off the back, that's actually a lot of work. And especially if you've parked close, it's easier to lose the hose when you're going to the front door with the wreath, the door on the right, than it is to just try to lose that much hose or say, well, we'll break it off. You're talking time. And honestly, if you can get in there and just stretch from the inside, I'd much rather do that. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. I think your point of the car fire line makes perfect sense. If you're going to hit it from the exterior and stretch a second line, why are you going to use one of your, massive pre-connects and then break them? The other thing I think is really an interesting point that you brought up is the deck gun and practicing with it. And I think that's important because we know how much water that deck gun's putting out. It could be 3, 4, even maybe 500 gallons per minute. And if you have a 500 or 700 gallon tank and it takes you 30 seconds to get that thing aimed properly, you've just wasted almost a quarter, if not more of or maybe around a quarter of your tank of water just trying to aim it at your actual point, so.
And like Nick said before, talking briefly about transitional attack, if we determine that entry door next to the garage doors are actually the means of egress and entry to a separate, business or again, bonus room, apartment, whatever you want to call it, I personally don't see any reason why you can't do a very brief transitional with your entry being that close to the seat of the fire, as opposed to having to stretch back around to the front door with the wreath.
Versus if this was, fire out 2 windows in the rear, you're probably not stretching around the rear, hitting it, and then going back out front and in. So Whereas, yeah, no, it absolutely makes perfect sense. And plus, we won't get into talking about pushing fire or whatnot, but there's, even if, let's just say you can push fire, you're not pushing it anywhere here. It's that's where it is. So it's not like you're pushing it down the hallway or pushing gas or smoke or anything else. You're not pushing it anywhere. That's the room it's in, and that's it. So, all right. Yeah. So anyone else on this one? Okay. So we'll go. It's the same house, but we've changed the scenario a little bit. So this is what you're faced with now. So how does this change? This is the same house, same location, but obviously now we have a garage fire. This indication, I think we all agree, would mean that most likely whatever doorway or passageway here is opened. And this is what you're met with. So Dan, why don't you, what are you doing different, if anything?
I think it would depend on where I was, which town I was in. If the garage door or doors are open or closed, and what we had for manpower, and you can tell that the fire is, if it's not already into that first floor of the house, it's getting pretty close. So if you have the manpower, by all means, get your line in the front door of the house and cut it off. And hopefully at least hold the fire in check. If you pull up, I know it's very tempting to bring an attack line right to the garage, but if those garage doors aren't actually open, and all you have is fire venting out of the windows, not a lot of first due engine companies are going to have the manpower to cut that garage door or force it open, or even the equipment to do so. So I think it really depends on what you have, but on a whole, I'm probably taking the line still in that front door, and holding the fire from getting into the front of the house, into the main.
Okay.
The main
Well, that's your answer. Your first line is going to the front door and entering towards the garage, knocking down any fire that may have extended, and holding it at the garage. Correct.
I think the only way I would really change that is if we pulled up and both those garage doors are open, and I know I can make a very strong, quick knockdown on the fire in the garage. But again, if the garage doors aren't open, I think that's a lot to ask the first due engine to force entry through a garage door and go right into the garage.
Okay. What about this? Like this door here? You're not forcing that to get in there?
Oh yeah, to be honest with you, I kind of forgot about that door. I might take a look in there. And that may be me as the officer looking, as they're stretching a line in the driveway, I can, gauging where the fire really is. If it's past that door, I still want to go in that main front door of the house. If I can force that door open and take a look inside and see that the fire has extended into the first floor, then my better option, I still think, is in the main door of the house there.
Okay. Paul, 6 guys, what are you doing?
I have to agree with Dan. I think whether the doors are open or closed plays a significant role on the fire attack on that.
These doors you're referring to,
correct, the actual garage doors themselves. Open, go ahead and see what you can do, deploying the hand line. Closed, we don't have the manpower to try and manipulate those doors to get at it. So looking at the smoke, how it's advanced and the color, if it's not in the main portion of the house, it's going to be any second, and we're going to go ahead and try and take that front door and see what we can do about making a push, keeping it as close to that garage as possible.
Okay. Nick?
Well, I'm going to go the other way just because we'll get conversation going. I'm going to put my first line at those garage doors. I'm going to take a leap because I see active fire very low. I'm going to assume that they're compromised enough to where I can make penetration with my stream. If I can't, then I'm still going to try initially to rake it at the top of the garage door at that I'll call it the transom or whatever you want to call it, the header, and see if I can at least get some of it broken up. At the same time, we're going to try to force that white door. Spoils of resources pretty quickly. My second due is going to take the other front door. But even if it wasn't, I would, as the officer, I would leave my firefighter and the hydrant firefighter at the garage and at that white door, and I would go and give the other door a look, and then kind of get a feel to see if it is pushing into the main occupancy, and then I would certainly give that update on the radio. I do feel that either between the white door or the garage doors, I'm going to be able to make at least a good check on this fire.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you can obviously make the argument either way. I'll say that either way, I would make the argument. I never would have considered, are these doors compromised or not? That wouldn't have, and I'm saying that's a great point. That never would have factored into me. You know, what do I have to do to these doors? I guess I think it depends to me, it kind of depends on what your second or third crew is going to do. And what I mean by that, how high of an importance are you placing on a primary search on that second floor? I think to me that kind of dictates where your lines need to go, because I don't want to, I believe that fire's on the first floor here if I saw this, or it's very close to getting to the first floor, as Paul said. And I would want to make sure that if I'm sending anyone up to that second floor to do a search, that I have those stairs protected. And so if I was sending guys to that second floor, I want a line in that front door. If I'm not, then by all means, I'll throw water at this part. And this goes into what we can, you know, my feeling is if a mother meets you out and says, I was home and no one else is in the house, to me, that doesn't mean I'm not going to do a primary search, but I'm not going to place as high of an emphasis on it when it's a single family private dwelling. If you bring me to the city or you bring me to a multiple dwelling, then that goes out the window. I'm not taking someone's word that my neighbors aren't there or the people that live below me aren't there, or I don't think anyone's home. But to me, the definition of a known life hazard would be, you know, we hear someone, we see someone, or we have a report of someone trapped from a credible source. And so if that's our definition of a known life hazard, then why can't that be our definition for everybody's out of the house? Meaning that the mother is a credible source that comes up to you and says, this is a one family private dwelling and everyone's out of the house, and we can adjust our tactics based on that. What do you guys, is that, you know, in some other land, or is that, you think, legit thought process?
I think it's absolutely the appropriate thought process. I mean, life safety is first, right? And, you know, if we are going to put troops inside, we absolutely need to protect them. They're part of that equation as well, because they are trying to find people on the inside. So you want to protect that interior stairwell. You want to try to keep that fire. I'm fine with writing off of the garage, you know, so it's the only issue there is if we're familiar and we think that bonus room is a big bedroom or whatever, you know, but either way, you've still got to get inside, and by protecting that stairwell, you're getting a lot of protection there. The other thing too is you're giving the crews the confidence. If I'm going in there by myself, because like I said, I leave my crew out front and they're whacking it, right? And then I go inside by myself, my confidence level isn't going to be where it could be had I known that I have a line protecting that stairwell, right? So that's the other part that sometimes isn't talked about.
And it's funny, going back to what you were saying with, you know, VES being a very, you know, black cloud for some departments. Like, to me, in a situation like this, it would almost be safer to VES a second floor than it would be to basically crawl past what could be fire upstairs and then maybe not have a way out if you don't have a line there, or if, you know, the fire overtakes the line, versus if I throw a ladder to a window, I know that window is going to be there in a minute or two, even if the fire takes control of the stairwell here.
Right.
But,
and to go with that too is because you know, or based on the probabilities that those are bedrooms that you're going into, they are going to have a door, and then therefore you can compartmentalize that area and do a search, and then absolutely retreat when you need to do it. It's hard to do the VES when, you know, you can't control that atmosphere, But yeah, I mean, that's the big thing with VES is when people understand you've compartmentalized, and hopefully you've built in that isolation to give you those moments of safety.
Paul and Dan, your first line went to the front door, both 1 3/4.
Correct.
Yeah.
Nick, what's your line to the garage?
It's going to be based on my crew, and I hate to say that, but the thing too is, I'm okay if we only pull 1 3/4, and the reason is this, 2.5s are hard to handle. Yeah, you can penny. Yeah, you can make a loop. There's a lot of things you can do, but we're flowing gallons per second, and so if I have an operator that I know can adequately flow, even if the pre-connect is pumped up a little bit, 180, 190 gallons a minute, and they're flowing for a lot longer, they're putting more water on the fire than if they're only hitting and shutting down at 2.5, because either they're by themselves or they're just not all that proficient. So I would not feel like I would need to pull a 2.5 on this, but you certainly could make the argument.
Yeah, I would not pull a 2.5 just in case. For Firewise, you could, but if we knock this down and then we decide, shit, this is definitely in the house, let's take this line and bring it into the house. I don't want to be bringing a 2.5 in with me at that point.
Right.
And I
Or
think
even the white door.
And I think people don't realize how much fire 1 3/4 can put out.
Right.
So, now does any of your decisions on, obviously it's going to be a more hostile environment going into the front door, making your way over to the garage and trying to hit this in and work and push it out. So the decision of coming in and knocking this and then going in, or going in and pushing this out, do any of your decisions change based on how experienced your crew is, or in this case, it's just what you think is best for the fire, fire-wise?
It does, but also we're spoiled with resources. So even in the most remote corner of the city, somebody's coming kind of quick.
Mhm.
So I would know that if I go to the garage, somebody's going to the front door, or if I go to the front door, somebody's going to the garage.
Okay.
So
Paul, what do you, or Dan, either way? I mean, how about in Shelton and Wolcott? I mean, are you going to sit on scene and you look at I am responding or spotted dog? Sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to do that. You look at spotted dog and you see, oh, these guys are coming, or you see, oh, these guys are coming, and maybe change your tactics based on that at all?
As far as Shelton goes, I'm horrible with looking at the spotted dog, to be honest with you. I kind of listen to who's on the air and which companies and what the staffing is. With that being said, in today's day and age, with what we're faced with the COVID, we've reduced what we can put on a rig. We're trying to limit the crews to 4. However, something comes in with a structure fire, I'm not going to be getting on anybody for running with the full engine.
Yep.
But I do feel heavily that, based on who your crew is, your tactics could certainly change slightly, without a doubt. You've got an inexperienced crew, where you might be able to, whether they mentally gain a little bit more confidence, by sitting out there for 30 seconds and hitting the garage with 1 3/4 and darkening it down before they make entry into the alpha door. That could change the fire for them, for that particular crew. Or you have the guys that have been around for a while, have been to fires, and they know exactly what to do when they make entry through that alpha door, the wreath door, whatever you want to call it, and get to the seat of the fire, whether it's breached the house or not. So I certainly feel that the manpower does depict the situation.
Okay.
Yeah, I think as long as I have, if this was in Wolcott, as long as there was 3 of us on the rig, I'd still, I wouldn't change my tactic. The only thing that would change for me is if it's somebody who's brand new, somebody who doesn't have as much experience. I'm going to be a lot less likely to want to peel off and do a search on my own or anything like that. In worst case scenario, if it's the driver and one person by themselves, you may be limited to putting water on it right at the garage doors, because that's all you really can do to actually make a difference on the fire.
And to go along with that, we'll kind of keep it in the volunteer realm for a minute, where we have officers, but it doesn't mean the officer is going to be on the rig. And one of the questions that I got earlier was, what advice do you guys have for maybe a fireman that's riding up front, just happens to be in that front right seat and there's no chief on scene yet? And I bring it up for this fire because we have 3 experienced guys that, took a fork in the road. One's bringing a line here, one's bringing a line here. So for those complicated fires that could go either way, what's your advice to a fireman that's kind of acting that day? And let me just say quickly that my advice to volunteer departments has always been train everyone like an officer, because you never know who's going to be the officer that day. So if you find yourself, what's your one sentence or two to someone that's the fireman that's riding officer for the day?
Make a decision.
Make a decision. Okay.
Make a decision.
Yeah. Make a decision and stand by it, and do what what you are confident in doing, or be confident in what you're doing.
You learn in fire 1, life safety, incident stabilization, property conservation. So you could certainly use that as a compass.
If you can save a life, save a life. If not, get water on the fire. To me, that's, that kind of says it. But yeah. So someone's asking what the best approach for this is. You know what? I'll message you in a little bit because I'm not really understanding the question. So we'll get back to that one in a little bit. We're going to go to the next one. Does anyone else have any other questions for this? Okay, so we're going to skip ahead. So we're going to go through this one. This is a ranch, kind of. It's a 1-story. It's mostly a ranch. You can see some smoke and fire. You got, some smoke on the eaves, and then you come around the rear, and this is what you're greeted with. Really nothing going on the D side. So this is what you're coming into, whether it be daytime, nighttime, or whatever. The last size up class we did, we had a long discussion about this. So I think it'll be a really good one. And I think it's one of the this is one that I think's changed in the last decade or so. I think if you go back 15 to 20 years, there weren't many staffed departments that would not have stretched into the front door, down the stairs, and made the push out the back. And I think that's probably changed significantly to today. So we'll start with fully staffed Bridgeport. What do you think you guys are doing for this one?
So my hope is that they're going to get off the rig, do a good 360. They're going to see that their problem is in the basement in the rear, and that's where they're going to stretch. It looks like there's a door or 2 doors there, some kind of entrance there for sure. And they're not going to fight this down through the basement, the internal basement stair.
Okay. So you're stretching a line around to the rear.
Right.
Paul, Dan?
Again, with the minimal manpower, I think, for just the ease of deployment, I think, upon a successful 360 and making that determination as to exactly where the fire is, it might be a little bit easier and less manpower intensive to stretch around to that Charlie side and stretch through those doors and make a knock on it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if everybody gets nothing else out of this, it's that the importance of how important a 360 really is, because it shows you where the fire, on this, if you from the front of the building, the fire is somewhere in the back, but you don't know necessarily that maybe it is in the basement or what. So you do that 360, now you can see it's definitely a basement fire, and 2, we have a home run that there's a walkout door, which is probably isn't going to be, all that difficult to force, hopefully. And it looks like, at least from these pictures, that there's no real obstructions to getting a line around the rear of the house. It looks like it's just a nicely sloped yard. There's no fence. There's no, landscaping you're going to have to go in and out of. So yeah, I would go right to that back door.
Yeah, and I think you said it, but you have to make sure you say it on the radio, which is A, that you have a basement fire, because your first in's probably not saying that you have a basement fire, and B, that you have a walkout basement. Those are two things that you got to get out there to the dispatcher and incoming units so that everyone's on the same page of, you know, maybe why you're stretching the line where you are or what you guys actually have. But I certainly agree with that. Now, the next kind of discussion with this is, are you guys just stretching around to the rear and going into these rear doors? Or are you maybe going to knock down this exterior fire a little bit? My concern would be failing the first floor and taking control of the first floor, or getting into the soffits or gable vent and starting to run the attic.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the entire exterior of that occupancy is combustible, you know, vinyl and everything, so it's going to run for sure. Yeah, I'm not against it at all. Obviously, it's all situational, but yeah, I mean, give it a little bit of a hit, try to, you know, keep it in check, and then see how it reacts, and then from there, you know, obviously, we want to get inside and give it a good hit. That's my thought.
Yeah, I probably would not walk by this without knocking it. And again, you're going to be in the rear, so as you knock it, you're really not pushing it anywhere. You're just sweeping the side of the house. What about you, Paul?
Same. You know, definitely going to try and get a knock on it. You know, as your additional manpower, or even that second in officer, maybe stretch that second line and see what you can do as far as maybe extension up into that attic. And it's probably just a little crawl storage space, you know, looking at the that Bravo side, looking at the vents. It's not a functional space, so to speak. So you're going to have exposure. You're going to have extension up into that area. So to get that additional line up there is going to be important, you know, depending on how fast you can get that primary line deployed and the volume of fire you can knock down.
So crew number 1 comes here, knocks this down, and enters the rear. What's engine 2? And for guys, you know, we're saying a lot of truck and engine, but realize, I mean, nothing that we've talked about yet, truck-wise, involves using an aerial device. Everything that we've talked about could be any volunteer engine company with the right training and the right tools, meaning a Halligan, an axe, a saw. So don't get wrapped up into, well, I'm not Bridgeport or I don't have an aerial coming or whatever. Nothing that we've talked about involves the use of an aerial or a master stream off an aerial yet. You guys agree, disagree? I mean, I hear that all the time. Well, we don't have an aerial, so we don't need to know about X, Y, and Z. And nothing here involves an aerial. So I just wanted to say that, Mike.
No, absolutely. I mean, you know, like you said, a lot of fire departments don't even have a ladder truck. So, you know, it doesn't mean that you don't do those tasks. They still need to be done. They're support functions.
Yeah. So first line goes there. What's the second crew doing for you guys? Dan, what's your second crew? Other than water supply, which the chauffeur's doing, what are the guys doing? Are they doing a search? Are they second line? Where's your second line going?
Yeah, by SOP, the second crew does stretch a second line. The second engine stretches a second line, and I think for this, I think it depends on the location of that line. I think depends on what that first crew can do, or what they find as far as fire conditions in that basement.
Okay.
You know, if they need a second line, you know, with them to help push into the basement and really knock the fire down. Or do they have, you know, a handle on it, and maybe they can bring that second line in that front door and make sure there is no fire extending up the staircase into the main, you know, into the main portion of the house. So I think it's really crucial that the officer communicates, you know, what they have and what the fire conditions are, and what kind of progress they're initially making with that first hand line.
Yeah, very well said and critical. I mean, we get into the habit of, well, the second line is going to go to the floor above, or the second line for a basement fire is going to go wherever the first line didn't go. But that second line is the backup for that first line primarily. And then if they don't need them, they can proceed to wherever they don't need to. And that only comes from communication. So I think that's an excellent point. Nick, what's your second crew doing?
pretty much we would expect them to do the backup. But the important thing is exactly what you guys just talked about is, you do your size up, right, which is the quick thing off the rig. You do your 360, and then you back that up with your can report, and then you follow it up with continual communications. And as you hit benchmarks and things like that, that allows people to deviate from the regular plan. But if you don't give them that information, then they're just going to do whatever they think they want to do, or what they think they're supposed to do. And if you're not letting them know what's going on, is your plan working, or is it not working? And or are you finding more of a problem? So maybe we don't need another line in the basement. Maybe we need to get to that front door and protect the interior to get to that first floor level again for search. So it really helps if we're getting those communications.
And you could very well have windows, right above that. I mean, that's a good volume of fire. You could have some good auto exposure right in there through those windows. So
Absolutely. And this one's ready to fail. So yeah, without a doubt.
yeah, absolutely.
So where's your second line going? Communicate and then either the front door, back that up in the rear?
Yeah. We're probably going to take the front door and go ahead and protect inside and see what you got, because you're going to have fire inside without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. How do your tactics change if someone is meeting you at the front door and saying, my kid is in that bedroom right there?
Again, time of day. The captain's freed up if we have the chief on scene. If not, I think that captain, he's going to be going to work, and he's going to be conducting that primary immediately.
Does that change where your first line goes?
No. Again, I mean, you could take down a volume of fire right there. I think you could get in there and at least darken it down significantly where you can allow him to advance a little bit more. I mean, you're going to get the heat, extension up through that chimney, through the stairs. Yeah. But he's going to be able to get a lot of work done if you can knock down that fire.
Nick, if you have a confirmed entrapment, is your first line still going around the rear?
It is, but we'll split. I'll go in the front door, and I'll have the crew and give it a hit. And honestly, all the more reason to really take care of that exterior fire, because that's the extension that we're worrying about. And if that's one avenue that we're afraid that it's going to get in through auto exposure, then we're going to take care of that. And then, get that line in and hopefully, reduce the fire, at least so we can make the interior conditions a little more tenable for the surge.
Dan, same thing?
Yeah, same thing. I would leave, hopefully I have there's three of us, and I can leave two guys to stretch a line, and I can go to the first floor and do that quick search.
The only thing that changes with me would be that's if I'm going in there by myself and sending a couple guys to hit this from either the exterior or coming in here, then that second line, I don't care what this line's doing. That second line's got to come in that front door and come protect me as soon as possible. I don't care if they're getting overwhelmed, if, whatever the case may be, I'm unprotected up there, or whoever is unprotected there. That second line rapidly needs to come into that front door, I think.
Agreed.
Other than that, all right, cool. Anyone else? Anyone else have any? You know what? There was a question before, whether it be this one or we'll shoot back to the garage one, doesn't really matter. But in general tonight, what we have not talked about is, and listen, we could spend 3 hours talking about this, but nozzle choice, automatic, smooth bore. It doesn't need to be a long diatribe. What are you guys stretching?
We only have smooth bore.
Dan?
All of our pre-connects are combination nozzles, but they're fixed gallonage, so we're not using any automatic fog nozzles.
Okay. Paul?
We have an option. One Crossley is an adjustable, one's a smooth, but smooth seems to be the weapon of choice.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, so let's see what we're gonna do next.
But there's nothing wrong with the straight stream. I'm not a hater, right?
Okay.
I'll even go so far as to say I'm fine with a pistol grip. It's just it is what it is. I don't use the pistol grip, but it does help to drag it through stuff and hook it on a fence, and there's a lot of things you can do with it, but I don't use it to fight the fire.
Okay. You let your guys do it, so.
Well, you know what I mean.
No, I'm kidding. All right.
No, I mean, they say the rescue steals all the lines anyway, so.
All right, so we'll get into this one, and then this is not we covered a lot of this in the last one. There's, so I kind of just want to put another one out there and see if we change our tactics at all with this one. So we have fire from the rear. It's, again, a walkout basement. It's not quite as easy of a stretch. So if our engine's here in this driveway or over here, it is a longer stretch around the rear. So just real quick, are you guys changing your tactics at all? Or are you still stretching around to the rear to the walkout basement here?
I'd like to, if it's a legitimately a feasible stretch. The one thing that I guess I would be concerned about with this house is what level of construction is actually complete. I mean, all the windows still have their stickers on it. That rear staircase certainly isn't finished. You still have the mini excavator in the back there. So one concern I do have with this house is what is it inside?
So
is it finished, or is it still all open stud and going to really be a problem for us?
well, so when I originally used this house, it was actually a second floor fire up here out of these windows in the front, and that's absolutely the major concern. But what you actually bring up is something that should not be limited to a house under construction, but really any basement fire, which we didn't even really talk about, is a lot of basements that are completely, a lot of houses that are completed have unfinished basements. And so everything that you just mentioned is spot on of a size up consideration of a basement fire, which is this fire being stopped at least for a little bit by sheetrock on the ceilings, or is this fire directly impinging on floor joists? And that's not always a question we're going to be able to answer because the whole basement's probably charged, but it's certainly something that we have to keep in mind, I would think. I mean, Paul, yours probably have swimming pools in them in New Canaan. But,
And basketball courts, car washes.
So does that change? Are you guys going to be able to figure that out and change your tactics, or what do you think?
And honestly, you bring up a good point. We do have houses that have, that much of an elaborate basement, with ice rinks, not with the synthetic ice. I mean, full ice rinks in the basement and whatnot. We are familiar with those particular houses. We do go out and get eyes on those homes. The ones that we don't, I think, it's, again, like Dan had pointed out, that being under construction and not knowing if the basement's finished or not finished, our first line's probably going to go to that Charlie side and go right to that seat of the fire.
Yeah. Nick, Charlie side or A side?
The Charlie side, but this is an ugly evolution for sure.
Okay. The other one's really the same. I just put the fire in the garage. I think if you went to the front door on the other one, maybe you're changing to the exterior here. But if you went to the exterior on the other one, I think you're probably coming around the rear for this one also. So I don't think we have to spend too much time on this one unless you guys have anything else. Again, just a different perspective on it. The next one, I think, this is one this is the scary basement fire, I call it, because there is no walkout. But a standard colonial fire out of one window in the basement. We've got a Bilko door in the rear. And other than that one room of fire, we really have nothing showing too much. So one thing I'll mention here that has nothing to do with the basement part of the fire is this large window here. What's that generally? And Paul, you guys probably see all the time in New Canaan. That's going to indicate what for like a colonial like this in terms of what are you going to experience when you go in that front door there?
Chandelier show-off window.
Yeah. So in terms of VES, that's obviously not a window we want to do if we got into that point, and just it's going to be a large cathedral area up here. It's not going to be a confined center hall type colonial. But to get into the basement fire part of this, that's what you're faced with. So what do you think? Whoever wants to go, it doesn't matter. Any of you guys.
I think on this one, without having that walkout basement, I'm going to be more inclined to go in the front door of the house. I most likely have Bilco. Most people, I would say, probably have their Bilco door locked. And to go even further than that, a lot of people have a secondary door at the bottom of those Bilco stairs, which may be locked. And I really don't think your first new engine has the equipment or the manpower to start forcing a Bilco door followed by a door that's going to have, you're going to be forcing it in a confined area. I think at this point, I'm going to suck it up and go inside, and knowing the typical layout of a colonial, that the staircase to go downstairs is probably going to be somewhere, not too far from the front door. It's not going to be the most pleasant push down the stairs, I'm sure, but I really can't see, the first new engine going through that Bilco door. I don't think you have the equipment, the manpower, unless it's 100% perfect. Your perfect day where you have 6 guys in the engine and the engine has a K12 saw, and everybody knows what they're doing.
Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, one of the things that does concern me looking at this house is the building construction. Is this engineered lumber? Is that what we're looking with as far as the construction in the basement? But as far as our entry point, we're taking the front door. We're going to try and find the seat of the fire internally. We don't have the manpower to worry about cutting the Bilcos and trying to make an entry that way. So we are limited to going in through the main entry and finding the interior stairs.
Okay. Nick?
We're pretty much going to do the same, even with the manpower. If they show up at the same time, if the truck crew shows up at the same time as the engine, or however you want to, name it, it's still going to take time. Just what Dan said, we're going to have to force our way through the Bilco. More than likely, it's got a padlock on the underside, and then that door going from the basement to that walk upstairs, they probably don't even use it all that much, so it's probably pretty well locked. So it's going to be a bit of a thing. So we're going to go through the interior of the first floor. But again, to Paul's point, lightweight construction, engineered construction, really being very cautious because we don't know how long this fire has been burning beneath. It could be very bad.
Yeah. What for those listening at home, what's going to be your, I don't say easy way, because I don't think there's anything easy about this fire, but zero visibility as you enter that first floor, what's going to be the most effective way to find those basement stairs? So you come, my feeling is you know that the stairs to the second floor should be within a few feet of this front door. So if you find those, at that point you kind of have to guess, do a right-hand search or a left-hand search, staying along the middle of that wall that supports those stairs, and you should find an outward opening door that leads to the stairs to the basement. Would you agree with that?
Correct.
Yep.
Now, someone did mention that there could be a second set of stairs in the garage, and I have seen that, but that's a gamble. If you take the time to try to find those and they're not there, you've wasted a decent amount of time. So I don't think, unless I had a homeowner there, I mean, this is one where if the homeowner meets me and says everyone's out of the house, then my second question to them is, how do you get to the basement? And, is that the only way? Is your Bilco, well, there's a Bilco. Is your Bilco locked? That's where my parents' old house where I grew up had this. It was like this. It had stairs, under stairs to the basement, but then the Bilco doors were under the deck, and you had to lift off 3 pieces of the deck to get to them. Unless the homeowner's there telling you that, until you burned the house down, you wouldn't know that that was there. It was covered very well. And so, when the homeowner's not there, I'm inclined to use the most straightforward way to get in there. And I agree. I don't think that's the Bilco door usually.
Right. it is a good observation that you could get a door from the garage to go to that basement. But again, I'm leaning towards that front door because it does satisfy the L again. It's my life safety. So even if we don't put this fire out and I can get somebody to go upstairs and get everybody out of bed, I don't care if I burn the place down. You know, I mean, but my stairwell is going to be protected theoretically because that line goes in the front door.
Yeah. So if your first line's going to the front door, what is your second crew doing? Are you sending them to the second floor for a search, or are you having them stretch a second line? And if it's a second line, where is that second line going to?
Personally, I'm going to try and take advantage of, I mean, you've got a couple of cars in the driveway. If there is somebody on scene, home, get as much information from them as possible. And, as long as everybody's evacuated the home, that second line is going to protect the stairs.
The second line, so the first line goes down the stairs, the second line's going in the front door and protecting those stairs. Okay.
Correct. Absolutely.
Dan, what about you?
Yeah, I'd be doing the same thing. And I think just to back up one step too, I think it's important to communicate that you have that Bilco door and that you'll probably want that forced open at some point for your basement, right? It's important in the sense that it at least gets the truck company or whatever crew is going to be doing that, responsible for that. It gets them in the mindset of what they need to come off the rig with.
Okay. Nick, where's your second line go?
Exactly what Paul had said. The first one's going to go down. That second one's going to be in a position to protect the stairs, and then take it from there. The Vilco really is going to be a problem, I believe. But to Dan's point, that's also your outlet if you can. So get that open, and let it vent if you can, right? So,
do you think it's appropriate to? So if you send your one truck department, and truck, I mean, it could be anyone. You send your truck to search the second floor. You've got your first line going down the main set of stairs. You got your second line protecting. Do you guys think it would be appropriate? And I know New Canaan, this might not be, but Shelton certainly. Do you think it's appropriate to have your RIT or fast crew work on the Bilco door?
Yeah, no doubt. You want to, again, clear the openings. If you can certainly get that Bilco open and make it an additional means of egress for the crews operating, why not?
Dan?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a viable option. It's only going to take two of your RIT team to do that. You're still going to have a couple people either doing something else or truly free in the event of them, that they're needed.
Mm-hmm. Nick, do you think RIT is appropriate, or would you leave them in the front ready to go?
If in a one truck system, absolutely. I'm a big fan of active RIT regardless. But we probably would have our second truck doing that.
Okay. So if you didn't have the manpower, maybe the RIT, otherwise probably
right.
not. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So there's a question here, but I'll actually disagree with it. This is again my opinion. If I'm a chief here and I have that first line, and that first line has made the push down into the basement and is working towards the fire and is making progress, then I'm with you. My second line's going into the front door to the stairs. If by the time that second line is ready to go, that first line has not yet made the push, or is having trouble making the push, or is maybe starting to not sure how this is going to go, my second line is going to sit right outside of that basement window in case things go really south. They can at least put this fire out from the outside. That's my last resort. But if I have an issue with that first line and my second line's sitting inside here, I got no way to put that fire out. Now, it could be RIT. I don't really have a problem with RIT having a hose line sitting right out here. And then if there's a collapse, they can drop the line and go to work. Or if it's a fire issue, one guy can sit here and put water in that window. But if I have fire venting out of there, I know where the fire is, and I don't yet have water on the fire, and I have a crew inside there, my feeling is I want a line here ready to go, because I don't know how this is going to go.
I agree, and I think saying that the RIT could do that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That line can just be sitting there.
I think we forget that while we don't maybe want to put a line into the window when there's firemen there regularly, we are wearing bunker gear and SCBA, so it's not like it's going to completely kill us if the alternative is burning to death. So Do any of you guys think that you would knock that? This is the true question that was here. If you have 5 to 6 guys, would you split them up? Have maybe 3 guys stretch the line to the front door and 1 or 2 stretch a line to here to knock it down while that first crew is stretching that line, or no?
I say no. That still takes time. Not that it can't be done, but it does still take time. I would not.
I couldn't agree more. I think there's a lot of things that get said that are, and that's not one of them, but there are a lot of things that get said that it's like the catch-all. I mean, like forceful entry, we hear all the time. I would just take the hinges, and it's like, well, that doesn't just happen like that. Or a trench cut. Trench cuts work, but they don't happen like that. And same thing with stretching hand lines. I don't care how good you are, it does take time, and that's the argument a lot of people have with RIT having a charged hose line there, so that it doesn't take time if there's an issue. But I'll add the other 2. I didn't mean to cut you off. Paul and Dan, either of you guys considering a knockdown simultaneously or no?
No, not at all. Again, labor intensive as far as manpower and taking the time in consideration. It's just better to take the front door and go to work.
Okay. Dan?
I totally agree. I'm not knocking it down from the outside unless it was absolute worst case scenario and that was the only thing you could do.
Or you're in Wolcott at 2:00 in the afternoon. It's you and one other guy on the rig. I mean, and I always bring that back. Monroe, Trumbull, whatever. I always bring that back to any of these fires. If it's me and one guy at 3:00 in the afternoon, yeah, we're not stretching into the front door, down the stairs, around, and hitting us from the inside. So, let's see. Anyone else? Any other comments on this one? Or okay, that one. We'll do New Canaan. So we're going to do one New Canaan, and then we'll get into some. This one should be fairly quick, and then we'll do some commercial to wrap it up. Not what you expected for New Canaan, huh? All right. So
They're there.
What's up?
They're in New Canaan.
This is still an $800,000 house, according to Zillow, though. But
Absolutely.
It's a lot.
I think this was legitimately like 500,000 or 600,000. Which is crazy, but and there's no horse farm in the back. So, all right. So this is what you're presented with. To clarify, this garage door is burned through, so you have straight access to here. So what's your we'll start with New Canaan. What do you do? Are you taking this driveway? You're still coming up as tight as it is?
Yeah, we're still taking that driveway. I don't know how long it is. It could very well still be a quarter-mile driveway. Typically looking at the age of the house, it's probably not. It's maybe 100-foot driveway, but we're still pulling up in there. We're going in, and it was discussed earlier about transitional, just going right to the gut. You're right there. So as you're charging a line, I don't see a problem with getting a knock on that right away. As you're stretching to the front door.
And you're not pushing it anywhere. It's a wall.
No, right. I mean, you're going to get volume.
Okay. 1 3/4.
1 3/4. Again, it's going to be hard once you transition back into the main portion of the home. With the 2.5. It's a tight house. That's a lot of bends and turns with the 2.5. So navigation is going to be difficult with the 2.5. So 1 3/4 is going to be the line of choice for this fire, and do a quick knockdown, see what you can get as far as putting the volume of fire out in the garage and going in through the house.
Okay. Dan, where is your first line going? Same thing?
If that use of that garage door is burned through, I think it's a good option to just put the fire out right there. But you still need to, at that point, even if you do bring the first line right to that garage door because it's burned through, you can see the fire, you can get right in there. You're at the very least, your second line needs to be going to that front door and then going into the house. And I think 1 3/4 into that garage is probably going to put that fire out. or, at the very least, knock it down and control it.
Nick?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, if anybody's thinking, well, if my Manning's tight or if my second due is well delayed, everybody says bring the nozzle and the coupling to the door. So you can still do that on that front door, right? But then instead of bringing the nozzle there, your coupling is already there. You can bring the hose around quite easily and whack that garage. And then when you're done, now you're set up for success to go inside. So yeah, I actually bring my line to the front door, but I'm going to absolutely hit that garage pretty seriously first.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so this one actually had a layout, so I just kind of put this together, but just kind of to kind of show what we're talking about all these times. Now, granted, this garage is a couple steps down, but when you and Trumbull Long Hill just had this job a couple nights ago, and it was a completely different job than this because the homeowner left this door open and it spread to probably a third of the house, and they still did a very good job with it. But when we have that door closed here, it gives us a little bit more leeway to do what we want here. It usually keeps the smoke conditioning here down. In that case, if we don't, then by all means, the fire is going to spread in here, and it's going to be lights out conditions in this first floor. And that's the basis of what we're talking about. And, if I had to go back to what that question was, if I'm a new officer and, or a fireman acting up, if it's a basement fire, you've got to determine your best access to the basement. And that's probably the most important thing to figure out is the quickest access to the basement. And if it's a attached garage fire, the probably most important thing to determine is the status of this door. Not just is it closed, but is it holding, or is it a door that they replaced with something cheap that's going to burn right through? And I think a lot of times that may dictate what your initial tactics may be. So I just kind of a quick example of that. Anything else you guys, that's going to take care of attached garage fires probably for the night. So anything else you guys want to kind of touch on with that stuff? No? Okay. I guess
I think we hit it.
All right. So is it 9:15? So we'll go another, I don't know, 45 minutes or so. We'll do a Meriden one. This is the last non-commercial one. All right. So this is from the great town of Meriden. And again, it's not going to be a super long one. There's one important thing that I wanted to touch on here, but otherwise it's fairly standard to what we've been looking at, just heavy smoke in the basement, walkout. So we'll just real quick, first line, is that going to the rear or front door in this case? Nick?
I'm going to the rear again on my 360.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah, seeing that access through the Charlie side there, it makes it pretty simple to get to the seat of the fire.
Okay, Dan?
Yep, I couldn't agree more.
Actually taking this away from a basement fire and transitioning to that upper floor, this is where, and we should probably spend another night on this, Nick, that half story. But is this, I came across this and it was one of those, even though we're not dealing like specifically with attic fires, I wasn't going to let this one go. Not really what I would expect to find up there. Not even sure if this has a stairwell or a pull down stair in the hallway. What are your thoughts on seeing this and kind of, is that what you expected? Maybe I'm just, I don't know.
Go ahead, Dan.
I just say with windows like that, I would expect it to be some kind of converted living space. It does look like that's a staircase in that picture of the attic. It looks like you can see the first couple steps in a makeshift.
Yeah, you're right. I missed that.
No, I wouldn't expect it to just be open like that with a window. I would,
Yeah.
I would expect it to be some kind of bedroom, kids hangout area, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I guess point is you never know. I just didn't when I saw that, I was like, I'm showing that before tonight, even if I don't have any real good scenario for it. All right. So let's do some commercial. So we'll start with a this is a like a so I kind of break up, like I said, I kind of break up that strip mall into the, older style, one-story taxpayers, substantially built, wood, solid lumber. We can cut the roof, not going to collapse right away. And then we've got this, which even though most of them are one story, they all like to make them look like they're two stories. And a lot of them still have flat roofs, but the flat roof is just like down the center, and then it peaks, or it's just a straight peak roof, but there's really nothing in there. So anyway, we'll go through this. I don't have a great view of the whole B side. My photographer fell asleep at the job, I guess. He's here tonight, so he's probably laughing or asleep, either one. But for the most part, what are we thinking here? What are kind of what's your hazards? We'll go through it. We'll start with Dan. This could be a Meriden or Wolcott, I'm sure. What's your thought process on this one?
Well, the first thing that I'm hoping is based off of the time of day. That front door into that business is probably open, and it looks like the fire's already venting out anyways. And I would agree, it's definitely not. Even if you couldn't get a good view of the side of the building. I think you have to assume that that's just a facade on the front to make it look like it has a second story. Depending on the occupancy, I think that plays into your concern of what may be in there, what hazards there might be. And then I think one of the concerns would be is if you have, most people tend to go with a 2.5 for a commercial occupancy. But do you actually have the manpower to maneuver that 2.5 into a small store like that? Whereas I think in Meriden or in Wolcott, I think it's going to tend to be 1.75 line that gets pulled first off the truck. And it's not the old school 135, 150 gallon a minute line. Most of the 1.75 lines, at least that I'm going to be using, are in that 175, 180, 185 gallon per minute. And because of manpower, it's probably what's going to get pulled off the line, first. I'm definitely concerned with the amount of fire. Is the cock loft open across the entire strip mall there? And trying to figure out how old the building actually is. Is it an older building that they've just renovated and put, made to look new, or is it a newer building where a lot of that facade and maybe even the roof is lightweight wood truss?
Well, how are you going to do that? Saying all the right things. I would try to figure this out. But for those at home, what are you actually going to do to say, okay, how can I figure this out?
And really, the only way you can figure, if you truly wanted to figure it out, you have to do some pre-planning. But if you don't have a pre-plan, it looks like a newer building. I'd probably assume that the roof system is going to be a wood truss of some sort, and that there's probably some nasty void spaces moving through that facade, that they built to make it look like it's 2 stories in the front.
Okay. Paul, what do you think?
Like Dan said, based on the time of day, hopefully that adjacent store is open. You can get in there, try and open up the ceiling in there, see what you're talking about as far as building construction, and what you see in that non-occupied or non-involved storefront is going to be very similar to what you're going to see in the fire building.
Yeah.
So that'll paint the picture for you there.
I think that's huge. And even if you can't do it, that might be, if you're in Shelton, you probably have a few extra chiefs, or Monroe or Trumbull or whatever. That's a great for a later arriving chief. Hey, get into the end of the store and see if you can determine what kind of construction we have going on here, Absolutely. Nick, what about you? What's some of your concerns here?
I mean, this is like, your newer type strip, whereas it's not, your old, type three. The big thing here is you're assuming based on the location of the construction, it's a slab and there's no basement. So hopefully you are looking at the fire is a first floor fire and not a basement fire that's come up to get you. It's tough. Hopefully you know what the occupancy is. Certainly I wouldn't expect any kind of even light industrial here. It would all be some kind of retail or similar. So how heavy is the fire load to go with? I mean, my employer wants me to say I'm pulling a 2.5.
This is a Dunkin' Donuts. This is a post office, and then
Right.
random stuff. So
So to Dan's point, you can get good flows out of today's, hose and nozzle packages with 1.75 inches. Listen, the place is a disposable building, and my big concern again is that life safety, and I am initially going to be concerned if it is a Dunkin' Donuts, where are the workers and all that and whatnot. But yeah, it's going to fall down quick.
yeah. So what's your first four guys doing, Nick?
Well, like I said, my employer wants me to say I'm going to pull a 2.5. So yeah, we're going to pull a 2.5. But the reality is that the flow on 1.75 inches, this thing isn't 500 feet deep, right? And so by and large, I think you're going to be able to hit what you need to. But I'm pulling a 2.5.
Paul?
I'm going to flip hats here. I'm going to say this is a Shelton fire. We have a little bit more manpower. We have, ample water. I mean, we trip over hydrants. So I would go with a 2.5 in that front and, see what you can do right there. I'm not even opposed to setting up a blitz fire. I know Nick kind of smoked at me there, but
Yeah, absolutely.
Fire or what? Dan, what about you?
I think either department for me, it's probably still going to be that 1.75 inches first, just for the ease of moving it around. I certainly wouldn't fault anybody if they argued they wanted a 2.5. But hopefully on your 911 call you get told what the business is, and kind of like Nick said, and you said this is a Dunkin' Donuts. I'm not really concerned about a giant fire load in a Dunkin' Donuts. I think trying to make sure everybody's out of the building, this can be pretty manpower intensive to search, depending on the smoke condition you end up with throughout the rest of the plaza here. You may need to have multiple people searching, and even some of the forcible entry, on those back doors going down the side. That looks like the Dunkin' Donuts drive-through there. Those side doors, if we were going to force those, they may be a little time consuming to force, depending on how fortified, they've made them. But as far as the actual fire attack, I'm going to take the 1.75 inches right in the front door. And, hopefully, for our ease, hopefully that front door, they're open, the door's unlocked, and you can move right in there, with minimal obstructions.
Are you guys so in a normal, and we'll get to it into the next one, but obviously in a regular 1-story ordinary construction commercial fire in the cock loft, we got to commit guys to the roof for ventilation and to cut it off. Are you willing to commit guys to the roof on this building?
It does not excite me. And honestly, I think there's more value just going down the line and popping ceiling tiles or poking holes in the ceiling. I'm not a fan of, because I just don't know what we're going to gain here. Yeah, I would have to say my gut says initially no.
Paul?
Yeah, like I had said earlier, go to the adjacent, storefront, start popping tiles. I mean, you can obviously see, like we initially spoke about, the building construction, but fire advancement, and you can see inside just as well as you can see what's going on upstairs. And I'm not keen about putting anybody on the roof right there.
Yeah, Dan?
I agree, especially if you do find that that's just lightweight wood truss all the way across. And I know some of the newer buildings, especially the chain type restaurants, um, a lot of them the truss systems are open. They paint them like a dark color gray
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
or black, and then now you're gonna have fire impinging on that immediately.
Yeah. So I don't want to get on a tangent, but Nick, you're not a Blitzfire fan?
No. I'm fine with it. And actually, I was going to ask, would anybody do
My
the deck?
I was gonna let you guys talk. I'm putting the engine here. I'm putting the deck gun in there, and my first line is going into an adjacent store.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
I'm not putting guys in here when I can knock it down from the outside. And this, to me, looks already involved. So I may even skip that store, go here, and see what I can do to push it back. But I think if you come into here, you're not going to push it, but it's just going to work its way down that entire
Right.
strip. So,
Yeah.
in my first tower ladder, as much as you may want to put it here on this corner, again, it's probably going halfway down here so that I've lost this side of the building, and I'm
Right.
probably going to lose this side of the building, but at least I'm going to try to keep it towards that end. So that's my thought.
Gotta save the package store there.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Priorities. So, yeah, Hal lives right there, so if he doesn't get his booze, he's going to be pretty angry. So, you can see his car right there. So they say the arsonists always watch their work. So there you go. But yeah, I don't know. But you know what? For nothing else, what I took out of this is I like that when you say you're stretching an 1 3/4, that you have. I'd probably stretch it 2.5, but you have the justification for it. And I have a chief that he doesn't care if you don't do what the book says. He just wants you to have a reason for it. Don't say, "Oh, I didn't know," or "Oh, I just felt like it." But if you're gonna stretch the different size line or stretch this line there, show him that you were thinking and that you said, "Well, I did it because of X, Y, and Z or whatever." So, yeah, I like it, and yeah, I don't want to put guys on that roof at all. That's not on my list to do. Anyone else? Any other? Someone mentioned here that their 2.5 smooth bore can do with a 1 1/4 tip is getting over 300 gallons per minute. There are a couple questions on here about just in general flows, like what are you getting out of flows, and we could again spend all night on that, but I think as a general 1 3/4 with a smooth bore is probably getting you, like you said, in that 170 to maybe 190 200 range, and then 2.5, what would you say, 225 to 250? Is that with a 1.1/8 tip? Is that sound about right for what you guys are getting on your lines to just kind of put numbers on it?
The 1.1/8's about 250, 260.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, the 1 1/4 is 330. The thing to remember with it is just because you can put that water out there, can you put it where you want it, right? So Dunkin' Donuts and every other place, unless it's open, like what Dan was saying, usually the more decorative places will be like that. Typically your Dunkin' Donuts is going to have a suspended ceiling. So that stream gets up in and you're not really able to move it around because 2.5 is not that maneuverable. And all you're doing is ripping through the suspended ceiling, and you're not even putting water on the fire because the fire is in the occupancy. It's not in the overhead, perhaps. So it's just some things to think about, when you're doing it.
Cool. Dan or Paul, anything else on this one before we go to the next one?
No.
Okay. So next one, a little bit more of the standard commercial, older. This is, I don't believe, truss. At least, let's say for the sake of conversation that we get into the adjoinings, and this is not truss, it's standard dimensional. So, brick exterior and wood interior, but not truss. So this is what you show up with: long set of stores, smoke out of a pool supply store. I'm going to leave it at this, and I'll tell you why. Because your first engine, this is what you're coming up to. and you saw how big the store is, you're not doing a quick 360 on this one. So we'll start with our discussion on this is what you pulled up with. Now, if you wanted to try to do a 360 and these stores were open, you can always try to go to adjoining to the rear. That always works. We're going to say that we're in COVID-19, and so everything's locked up nice and tight. So your 360 is delayed. So I guess Paul didn't like us. No. But Nick, let's say this is Bridgeport. How are you guys getting a 360 done in this case?
Hopefully either the second due or maybe the second truck is going to go around the back. We also have a safety officer that runs around in a pickup truck, and they're pretty heads up. So it wouldn't surprise me if they decided to take a hot lap. So that's kind of it,
Paul, what about you guys? We said we don't, it's a large building. So you're not getting a 360 done quick. Who's going to do your 360 if you had something like this?
Again, maybe at that point, the second in officer, the lieutenant, will be able to grab a 360 real quick. Again, our SOP in a building such as this, if access is there, the second dude takes a lap around the rig or around the structure. Okay. So you'll be able to get to see what's going on through the backside.
So your first due is generally not doing a lap, even if it's like a private dwelling?
Oh, no. A private dwelling, the first dude's taking, or the officer's taking a lap, seeing what's going on. But a strip mall such as this, depending on the length, it might be just as easy to have the second due officer take that hot lap.
Dan, what about you guys? How are you getting a 360 done in this one?
Maybe the outside crew of the truck, or maybe the third engine if the shift commander tells them go around the rear so we can see what's going on back there.
Okay.
But the first two companies are going to be committed to the front, and the first two engine, and then the second two engine doing water supply.
Yeah,
they're both going to be in the front of that building.
Okay. But we have a lot, obviously at work, we have a lot of large buildings that you may not have access to the rear, and a lot of time. Now, grant, obviously, manpower, but we have someone going to the roof automatically. And I would say 50-50, maybe a little less than 50% of the time, it's the person on the roof that's giving you your first report from the rear. And so if you're putting someone on the roof immediately and you have not gotten a 360 done, don't discount getting information from them up there on what's going on in the rear as well. Or just get on the radio and say, hey, we were unable to get a 360. We need second or third due to, swing by the rear on their way in or something. So I'll give you a 360. Nothing mind blowing, but we'll go through it. So we have a one story. We've got smoke. What's your first crew doing? That door's locked. So what's your first crew doing? COVID-19 shutdown. Dan,
well, the problem with the COVID-19, and even if it was like, say, a Sunday and they're closed on a Sunday, clearly we're probably going to have a delay in notification. So even though it's not so spectacular yet, it does tell me that I do run the risk of having an advanced fire that just hasn't told me that it's advanced yet. Mm-hmm. But that first engine is still going to go to the door that pool's place and set up there, and they are going to bring it 2.5.
And are they going to perform forcible entry, or they will wait for the truck company to come?
Typically, they're going to wait. Okay. I have one engine in particular that could be there for a little bit by themselves, and I think they're still going to wait.
And so you said a 2.5 for this?
Yeah, just because it is a pool joint, and we just don't know. Again, if it's a delay in notification, it could be an advanced fire.
Yep. Paul?
Yeah, I think we're going the alpha side, the front door, taking that door. Again, our SOP says we're going with a 2.5.
This is New Canaan we're talking about?
This is New Canaan. Yep. I mean, even Shelton, we're going with a 2.5 with that. Not waiting for the truck. We're taking the door and we're going to go see what we got.
And Dan?
I'm a little bit concerned with what they have, as far as the fire load in there.
Yeah, I think same idea, go to the front door. I would want a 2.5 for this because seeing that it is a pool, It is a pool store. I'm pretty concerned with what they have in there and what they store as far as chemicals, and how much they store. But I'd rather have that larger volume of water available.
Okay.
Uh,
So
you know,
Dan,
it's also a lot bigger building, you know, than that,
side.
than that last, you know, than the last one we were looking at.
So Dan, you already said your second engine's here with you establishing a water supply. What's that crew going to do?
They're still going to pull a second line. It'll either go in the store, or if they thought there was extension, you know, to either side, they may set up to go into one of those other stores.
And what's the truck going to do?
The truck, depending on if the first engine forced entry on their own or not, they'll either do the forcible entry if it's needed. The inside team is going to do some sort of search, you know, through this store and some of the adjacent stores, and the outside team, they'd probably end up on the roof, and they'd, you know, maybe on the backside doing forcible entry, you know, do at least up on the roof to take a look and see what's going on. Maybe not necessarily cutting it, but they're going to be outside probably for the majority of this fire.
Nick?
Well, you know, you run out of people fast here. So if we think this is an active fire and this type of occupancy, we're actually going to pull a second alarm, and that's going to give us two more engines in a truck. But you know, we're going to split our truck crews. So 2 are going to go into the occupancy, 2 are going to go to the roof, and then hopefully 2 are going to go to either side. And that's the 8 guys from the first 2 trucks. The rescue is going to do similar activities based on the need. You know, the thing to talk about is, and we don't talk about it at work, is that even though we have a 4-man engine, you know, the operator stays with the rig. So now we're down to 3. You really do need more than 3 people to operate at 2.5. And so a wise commander is going to say first and second due are actually going to be the first line. And that's, I really do believe why the second alarm is so important, to get additional engines there, not for the vehicles, but for the manpower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So Paul, where your second crew is just, I mean, in New Canaan, they're just gonna, I guess, help with the 2.5. That, I mean, you guys are behind the 8 ball here. 6 guys is not putting out this fire.
I mean, this right away, this is the third alarm fire for us, no doubt. You know, right off of dispatch, being a commercial building, you know, clearly looking at the dimensions of it as well. This is right away a third alarm assignment.
Mm-hmm.
We're showing up with this with an engine and a truck. Again, like just with the tanker, we got a lieutenant and an operator on the truck. A lot easier to drop the operator and put him to work, as opposed to with the tanker, which is going to be moving some water. So, I mean, you're gaining some people right there. So you're going to be able to manipulate that 2.5-inch hand line a little bit easier than you will with the residential here.
Mm-hmm. Are any of you guys, this is a question on here, are any of you guys prioritizing supplying the sprinkler system, if there's one in FDC?
Yeah, if there is one by SOP, the first due engine is, or the second due engine, it's for us in Meriden at least. The first due engine is supposed to hit the FTC, but there are a lot of places where that's not feasible. We have a lot of buildings kind of similar to this, you know, strip malls or whatever, or you know, some of the bigger strip malls where the FTCs are all in the back of the building. But that's always, I shouldn't say always, but almost always communicated to the second due to go to the back to hit the FTC.
Yeah.
But somebody would be taking care of it.
Nick, FDC?
Yeah, it's going to be a later arriving engine. You know, I don't think that it would be the priority of the first or second. You know, I mean, assuming that it's, you know, our water system is pretty good, even on the north end. You know, as long as everything's going okay, you know, your 13 to 21 gallons a minute per head should kind of be okay on the city system. But yeah, it will get done. It won't be done right away.
Paul?
In Shelton, no doubt. I mean, the second or third engine, realistically, the third engine is going to be taking control of the sprinkler system.
Okay. I mean, there's a lot of different ways we could go with this. We'll say we have an engine and a truck in the front of the building. Okay. or 2 engines in a truck in Meriden or whatever. Are you guys sending any apparatus to the rear or just people? Do you have a specific type of apparatus you want in the rear? What are some of the operations that you think are going to be undertaken in the rear? Let's kind of go through some of that stuff. I have my thoughts, so I'm kind of prepping it, but are you guys sending stuff to the rear or what?
I think this building's big enough where it would make sense to get an apparatus around the backside, if you can. A truck would be nice, but like for us in Marion, with only having 1 truck, if they wanted a second aerial
You
for
have
a truck
a
company, they're calling Berlin or Wallingford, to come to the scene, and that's going to take 15 minutes. So maybe one of the 4th or 5th new engine that's coming on the second alarm, I think would be a good idea to send to the rear. I'd want that, that door forced. I think that's a good ventilation point for some horizontal ventilation.
Yeah.
That that rear door where the smoke's pushing out of the top. So, and then any utility controls, if they can do that quickly while they're around back.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think with how big it is, I think it makes sense to just if you can get back there, it might be quicker to drive, to drive the apparatus right back there.
It definitely is quicker. I think, and I realize I should have gotten like an overhead view of it, but this is a big building. You know what? I'll let Nick answer that question, and then I will get an overhead view of this. But Nick, what are you doing for the rear here?
Unfortunately, it's not spelled out by policy, but typically we've seen it ends up being the 3rd new engine, and if it's not the 2nd truck, it's the 3rd truck on the second alarm.
Okay. And what are some things that you would want them to do back there other than force entry into that? Is there anything other than forcing entry into that door there?
Well,
Yes, I googled Dairy Queen to find that building because that's where my daughter brings me about every day, and I'm happy about it. So, but
awesome.
This is it's right around here is where the pool place is. So you can see how big of a building it is. And there's no atriums here. This is all building. So you're driving around the entire thing to get back there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's all that recon stuff that you're looking for. What's going on in the back. Some of our places have hydrants in the back, so that helps out. But it's definitely forcing to get the alternate entry, but more importantly that it's a neat means of egress.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. So those
Also,
are
for me, it's RIT too. I mean, any sort of collapse that we might have in the front, now that's your only entrance in there. And as we've said, these doors are not going to be easy to force, so let's get going on them sooner than later. The other thing that I think the rear affords you is you can put a well-equipped, and I guess when I say well-equipped engine, I mean almost like a squad type of apparatus that has a couple saws on it, whether it be forcible entry or roof. And you have a very low roof here that frankly, any almost scissor ladder would reach. And it actually gives you a really good access to the roof without having to overcome this high, weird parapet here. Right. And so it allows your tower ladder or aerial ladder to kind of be that standby master stream in the front while having all of your access and egress to the roof be from the rear in a fairly safe area. Keeping in mind there's no parapet, so if it gets really shitty up there smoke-wise, you're not well protected from walking off, essentially. But I also, coming from this being a fairly regular type fire, I want to know what's going on in that cockloft as soon as possible, because that's going to, again, dictate if we can be in and out of here in an hour and a half, or we're going to be here until tomorrow, even inspection holes, just, a couple perf cuts to give us that triangle.
Right.
Over the pool plus, adjacent to the pool plus, probably throw, by all said and done, six or seven little inspection holes in there and see, is this in the cockloft and how far is it going in the cockloft, But this is one of those, like, we don't know until we get in there. Like you guys said, this could be a delayed fire. We could get in there and have heavy fire above us, heavy fire below us, or we could get in there and find burning rubbish in the corner, just creating a black smoke condition.
Right.
So, what else? Anything else that we missed on this one? I mean, is your second line going into the store? Is it going into an adjoining store?
It depends on what you really find for fire conditions in there.
Okay.
You know, if you have a well-involved fire, you may need that second line to come in that store with you. Or if you find that it's not, you know, as involved as you may think, you may be able to just send that second line to one of the other stores. In the event that there is extension.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, the one thing, Dan, that you had spoke about was having a rapid intervention team. I mean, for a building of this size, you know, don't be afraid to add multiple RIT teams to this assignment either.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. Nick, anything else?
No, it's all good. I mean, so much of it is situational because you could really burn through, even on my department, a lot of resources fast and still not cover all the bases. So it's really communicating and really kind of figuring out where it is and where it's going.
Yeah, and this fire in Bridgeport and New Canaan or in Wolcott, it's going to burn the same. So, and you're going to need the resources no matter where you are. So get them coming as soon as possible.
Right.
Without a doubt. Anyone else have any other questions? I think it's almost 10 o'clock, so I think we'll probably wrap it up. I just put a link in the chat to a survey if you guys wouldn't mind filling it out. But I mean, as closing, I know I learned a lot. I'm still trying to process, and not in a bad way, that for that fire before, I'll just go back. I'm still trying to wrap my head around, you're bringing an 1 3/4 for this and a 2.5 for this, and not in a bad way, just in a getting me thinking kind of way, you know?
I think my biggest concern is like what's in that pool. There's a pool store and a strip mall right near my house, and it's an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
They store, I mean, there's chemicals all over the place, you know, and that's my bigger concern. You know, and that first one, going back to not really having the manpower to easily maneuver in position at 2.5 in an effective manner. And knowing what we get out of our 1 3/4, I'm not necessarily afraid of using it, at least to get started.
Awesome.
And not that you're certainly not attacking Dan, you know, but it's a pool store. You know, I guarantee they've got, you know, copious amounts of chlorine in there. And, you know, you look at the MSDS and, you know, chlorine fires, they tell you outright, I mean, just water.
Yeah. No, it's a great point.
And a lot of it, you know, and that's a big point that you need to take into consideration for that particular scenario.
And I think it's a fantastic discussion point. And I mean, if I had to sum up what I was trying to get at it tonight, I mean, that's it, you know, making people think and giving different perspectives on things. I think it's awesome. So, if anyone else has any questions, I'll open the floor to anybody, but, you know, I've been addressing any chats that there are. I can't thank Nick, Dan, and Paul enough. You know, I thought it was phenomenal. I can't thank you guys enough for signing up. You know, hopefully we'll do more of these. And, you know, if this is, you know, these are weird times that we're living in. So, you know, take care of each other, watch out for each other. And, you know, I my phone's silent at night, but you can text me anytime during the day. And I don't know, you guys have any closing stuff, Paul, Dan, Nick?
No, I thought it was great. Like you, I learned a lot. I mean, you know, I've worked with Nick a few times in different environments, and Dan's first time I've met you, I guess you can say. It's been a pleasure.
I think you may have taught me Fire 1, Paul, back in like 2008 in Fairfield.
Yeah, that would be
I think I remembered the name, and then I saw your face. I'm pretty sure, you know, I think that was my first exposure to you. I've heard a lot of good things about Nick. I've never met him personally, but it was a lot of fun tonight. Very informative.
Well, thank you guys. Nick,
Absolutely.
anything from you?
It was good. I mean, I just hope that the crowd got something out of it, and that it's relevant to them, and I hope it does get the thinking process going. And I did enjoy this. I definitely appreciate the invite. It was an honor.
Well, thank you guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
All
thank
right,
you.
so I put the survey in the chat if you guys don't mind, and everyone's on my email list now. So as I do more of these, I will certainly get them out on emails and social media. And stay safe, everyone. Have a good night.